taxpayers and workers. We share the burden almost 50-50 between overseas taxpayers and domestic taxpayers. That is a unique formulation. We will, if we are able to execute this recommended program, once more reassert Barbados's position as a standard in social partnership, in the standard of solidarity. But we also know that there is no hiding, there is no avoiding the fact that even if it's 50% of 50%, there are some people who will go home. There are some people, the government, to be fiscally fit, needs to be slimmer. And I want to emphasize that an integral part of the program were those things that Dr. Greenidge mentioned, that we are going to do to invest in those workers who may be displaced. We are establishing a $30 million training budget. $30 million. That is a substantial, significant training budget. We're going to establish an equally large program to digitize all of government, to digitize our medical records, our government records. We'll be able to offer every displaced worker an offer, that's our intention, our hope, of training or of part of this program to digitize government. We also hope to offer every displaced worker the option of some land, some greenhouses, some facilities to consider an alternative career in agriculture. And we are going to offer displaced workers a ring fence, a special part of the $400 million government procurement budget, which they will have the ability to bid for. So we have 4 planks of offering a program that is unprecedented in scale and scope to invest in people and really empower, retool, enfranchise, and retrain. And let me end by saying that we think that this program that Dr. Greenidge has presented and the team has worked on with the social partnership is actually best measured not in numbers, but in what it says about the Barbados character. It says that we are resolute, that we seek fairness and justice, but we are determined. And one of the other aspects of the Barbados character that I want to end with is that we don't like quick fixes. It's one of the reasons why we are united as a country in not wanting to go down the road of a devaluation or depegging of our exchange rate. We believe that will deliver nothing fundamental. Anything fundamental that we need to do will not be solved by that. And it's also why growth, let me come back and end with that, is such a critical part of this program. We've talked a lot about the numbers and what we need to do, but think of the growth strategy as equal in importance. It is tied up with the other things the government is doing. We want to create a high-skilled, a high-wage, a knowledge-based, a creative-based economy, a fossil-free economy, a renewable energy-focused economy. And that is integrated in this program with the other things you've heard this government is doing. Actual policies, not words. Our first jobs initiative. What we're doing in UE to remove fees and encourage more people to go. The integration of the community college, the polytechnic, and the Earthston Training College. We are also, as you know, trying to digitize government. You've heard us say that now several times. Create a 24/7 government. Really make doing business easy and easier in Barbados. Easier for every citizen, not just doing business, just carrying out your day-to-day life. And we think that will also support growth. We are looking to spur the private sector in terms of creating new special economic zones, tech zones, cultural zones, and of course you remember our plan for the new peninsulas and islands. That's all about creating investment-driven, private sector-driven growth. So this is a growth strategy, a strategy that brings down our deficits, brings down our debt, and paves the platform for opportunity and prosperity. And I would view it as much as about growth as about restructuring. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Perhaps I'd like to jump in at the start. Dennis Johnson, let me identify myself as Starcom Network. How much has external shocks been built into creating this program? Because as we speak, there is the shutting down of Petrotrin in Trinidad and Tobago. We talked about natural disasters to which we probe, but there are other shocks outside of our control that may impact this program. How much of that is built into the economic program going forward?
If I could respond first and then maybe Kevin. Dennis, it's a very important question. We have thought very seriously about this, perhaps coloured by what happened exactly 12 months ago in this region. Hurricane Maria, Hurricane Irma. We are building in a climate resiliency into this program. You'll have heard Kevin talk about a roofs to reefs program, about trying to help people repair their roofs ahead of this season as much as possible. We're also in this program building up a buffer. So as Kevin introduced at the beginning, one of our problems has been the collapse of international reserves. We are now down to, we have stabilized reserves, but they reached a level that really put our dollar in some jeopardy. We've stabilized it, and this program is about rebuilding those reserves. But to your point, we can't just rebuild to where they once were. We need to rebuild to a new level of resiliency, a new buffer, which will take into account the ability to withstand a hurricane. We want to have insurance policies to do that. We want to have stronger building to do that, stronger roofs. As you know, and I've heard you say on your program, to make a roof hurricane resilient does not actually cost a lot of money, but people need to prepare. So we can do all of those things, but we also need to have insurance in our reserves to deal with that, and that is a key part of the program. Kevin, do you want to talk a bit about the reserve?
Just to add to what Professor Avinash said, we're building back the reserve to a comfortable level with some buffers in it. That's built into the program. But this is why it's so critical to get our debt to a more sustainable position. Because as Dominica, others in the region would have indicated by experience, when you get a natural disaster, you need to take on additional debt in order to clean up and restore and rebuild. So you need to have your debt levels at a comfortable, sustainable level, because you know then you need the room to go back. If we are where we are now, 175%, 70% of GDP, and we get a natural disaster, we literally have no space on the fiscal to do any expenditure or on the debt to do any borrowing. So this is why the program builds in a path that gives you stability in a very quick time, and over medium term bring you to 60% of GDP.
Does it also factor in the changing cost of energy? The cost of fuel, oil,
so those would
drives a lot of our transportation.
So part of the program is on the external side. So in terms of economic programming, we usually look at growth. So we deal with that on the growth side in terms of GDP growth, etc. Then on the external side, you look at your import path. You know how much you import. We have high potential to import, and we kind of project decent way, not perfect, what our import path will look like. And going to that will be our projection, and based on international institutions' projection of where oil prices will go over the medium term. So you're building in that, and on the export side, you're building different assumptional shocks. We even try to go down to when we think a cricket match might happen. You know, you don't get these things right. So what's the bottom line? You try to build your reserves so you can anticipate it. It's like public, your personal financing, right? You know, you used to say put away at least 3 months for liquidity fund for a rainy day, but then sometimes it rains real hard. And you got to go and get extra there. So it's from that context.
Only last evening, Dennis, the governor was talking about how we need to build in for oil price shocks. So I want to ask him to comment on that.
Yeah, I think this is a very important question. And I think the issue really is having those buffers to protect us. So, you know, quite often we talk about having at least 3 months of reserve cover. And that, in a sense, is really just a minimum benchmark for us. We really want to have a much larger buffer of reserves to cover us in the event that there is a shock. And I think the point which Kevin was just making is important, especially as it relates to the fiscal. You need to have that room, even in your fiscal, as you go forward, because you plan a program and you say, well, I'm going to run a deficit of 1%, 2%. If you don't have adequate buffers in there, you will find that you're not able to address those shocks that occur. If the prices of oil go up, you're going to lose. You know that you're going to lose some reserves, and therefore you need to have a sufficiently large buffer that even if you lost 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you don't suddenly begin to feel uncomfortable because of the loss of reserves. And I think that is going to be very, very critical for us going forward, to the extent where a little overshooting may not be a bad thing.
I have a couple of points I'd like you to address. The actual savings areas were rushed through, so I'm glad that you're going to send the slides out so you'll get a better idea. It said that it was a result of the online survey, so I'm not sure whether that's what people told you or what you have decided that you're going to do. I'm assuming it's the latter, based on the results of the survey. However, not to go into every detail, but how soon would there be a detailed action sheet, for example, for each one of those entities that you cannot do only internally, that would call for macro private sector or micro private sector investment, selling a bus off, what kind of program that would be, or buying CBC or some other entity, because that brings up questions about the debt that some entities may have that the buyer would not be interested in taking over. For example, previous owings to the government for taxes and VAT and whatever. Is that, not to get into each detail, but I want to know, is there going to be a sheet released to the private sector or to the public about how each one of those, before Christmas, or is that sometime down in the future? And after that, I'd like to know if you have a conundrum in that you are now reaping benefits. I read in the paper today that you're going to get wonderful roads because of the taxes you're collecting now for the fuel tax. But at the same time, California has now mandated some of the most far-reaching environmental standards moving towards renewable energy. Renewable energy saves you importing the fuel. But you have a conundrum because you're making money off of the thing that you would like to stop importing, and therefore on the one hand you don't want to lose the fuel tax revenue, on the other hand you want to stop having to spend that foreign exchange. Do you have a problem where your hands are tied in terms of initiatives to really push Barbados towards renewable energy?
So Patrick, you've asked two important questions. They're different. Let me take the first one first and then ask Kevin or Clyde or anyone on the team to join in. But the issue of timing is an integral part of the program. So as Kevin mentioned in his presentation, we have divided up what we're doing between those things that we can do fairly quickly and those things that will take time. Well, of course, this plan needs to be approved by the cabinet, and if it were to be approved, there are those set of savings that will only come through working through with those entities, and that's why we've broken it up between the first 6 months and then the next 12 months. So where we're having to, for example, develop a new model of how we might lend money to make it able for bus drivers to buy buses, and then to have a regulatory system in which they are operating their buses. We know that cannot be done the next month, the next 3 months, and we're not counting any gains for that until the next 12 months from here. On the question on the petrol tax and renewable energy and our ability to fund the roads, when we put on the petrol tax, we were very conscious of what you were just saying. That we knew that this will probably not be a tax that will be in place in 20 years' time, because we are moving to more electrical cars, fossil free, and we want to do that. We don't think that's going to happen in any material way over the next 5 years. So we are thinking about it and looking at what the evolution of that tax would be, and we expect this not to constrain ourselves and constrain our expenditures. I don't know if other members wish to add.
Let me just, on the last one, if in terms of the fuel tax, you move and you encourage more alternative, safer energy, then you're also going to save on the import bill. So your net effect is going positive. So you have more fiscal space, so to speak, to do your investment. So going in that direction will save you tremendously on the back end, particularly since the direction of the fuel prices is upward. So it would be ideal for the government to consider losing on the fuel tax if it's going to save on the import bill of fuel.